Someone coming down.
Here we go.
Welcome. Today's show is all about my most favorite topic is education. I'm so passionate about teachers. They are the cornerstone of our society. They're in there every day on the front lines, and they're creating our future productive citizens and leaders of our nation. And so education is so very important. We hear a lot of talk about educational reform and politics and social. We even have a documentary now, The Waiting for Superman. And so what we're going to do today is just take a small segment of that and try to analyze it a little bit and see if we can come up with a solution. Today we have on our show Mr. Troy Scott. He is a first-year teacher. We also have Angel Cortez. She is a student in his behavioral psychology class. Welcome, Mr. Scott.
Thank you. Hello, Oprah. It's an honor to be on your amazing talk show. I'm a huge fan of yours, and I love your insight. Thank you so much for having me on your show today.
Thank you, and welcome, Angel.
Thank you, Oprah. I can't believe I'm here in person.
Well, thank both of you for coming so far away and coming to Chicago and being willing to share with us and talk with us about your classroom and your school. So let's start, Mr. Troy and Mr. Scott, I'm sorry if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself and your classroom.
Sure. Thank you, Oprah. Well, I'm a first-year teacher at Central High School in Topeka, Kansas. My course load is 3 world history classes, 1 U.S. history class, and 1 psychology class for a total of 3 class preparations, which is already a huge problem from the start. To make matters worse, my students are of a totally different background than mine. I grew up and attended school all the way through college in a rural part of Missouri outside of Springfield.
I see.
Where I come from, students seem more laid back and respectful. And now I'm teaching my first year in an inner city high school where the norm is that the students seem to run wild with gangs, guns, fighting, and overall disrespect for authority as the norm.
Goodness. Well, thank you, Mr. Scott, for your perspective. And, you know, there's a teacher and a student in the classroom, so we also want to get the student's perspective of the class. So, Angel, if you would, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you feel about the class.
Okay, well, my name is Angel Cortez, and, well, my family's from Puerto Rico. So in my culture, we can be loud and enthusiastic. So sometimes people might perceive that the wrong way and that we're being disrespectful, when in fact, we're just excited about what we're going to learn. And I feel like Mr. Scott doesn't understand us, and instead of helping us, he bullies us and punishes us for every little thing. Like, for example, the other day, Mr. Scott lowered our grades, and just because we were loud. And, you know, we were excited because it was a new concept that we were learning, and we lost points over an assignment that we worked really hard on.
So,
Well, I tried to actually be proactive when I first heard about the school's disciplinary problems during teacher orientation by meeting with the principal, Charles Dobson, 3 days before classes began. He gave me what I believed at the time to be good advice, urging me to be really strict at the beginning and lighten up as the year went along. He also admonished me not to make any promises or threats that I didn't intend to follow through with. You know what? I didn't even get 5 minutes into my opening lecture of the first class day before the students were already standing and shouting and taking control of my class. The biggest problem is that the students have no respect for themselves, for others, or for authority. I'm hoping that you and your expert panelists can give me some of your world-famous guidance today, because it is actually true that I did lower grades for some students who were continuously misbehaving in class and wouldn't listen. But I did give them fair warning the first day of class. I told them, either behave or I will have to lower your grades. Besides, my department chairperson herself, Dr. Mary Kincaid, advised me to do it, and she's a great teacher.
Do you see? He doesn't understand us, and it feels like he doesn't even care about us. He just took our grades away.
okay, so you all correct me if I'm wrong, and I think I'm hearing from both of you here. It seems to me that the problem is that the school, the teachers, and the administration, their lack of cultural awareness seems to negatively affect the dynamics, the learning dynamics in that school. Dr. Nagy, what do you think about this?
Well, Oprah, there are many problems here, I'm afraid. I think what people don't realize is that there are different levels of socioeconomics here between Mr. Scott and Angel. There's a misinterpretation of communication between them. And like you said, the teachers and administrators' lack of cultural awareness affects the learning dynamics of this school. You know, Oprah, teachers are predominantly white and middle class, and they don't understand the needs of the students when they are more culturally diverse. You know, by the year 2020, 2/3 of our public school students are going to be minorities. Troy comes from a middle-class background. He doesn't understand where the students are coming from. And he lacks the ability to relate to his students, which causes major conflicts within this classroom. You know, Abraham Maslow did research on the hierarchy of needs, and everybody proceeds up the steps of the hierarchy. And students must feel safe, they must feel loved, they must have a belongingness. And that is not happening in this classroom. If safety is not met, neither the teacher nor the student can function.
Wow, that's pretty insightful there. I didn't realize that by 2020, 2/3 of our students will be minority. A vast contrast to those who will be teaching them. Mr. Scott, what do you think about our panelists here?
Well, I understand what Dr. Nagy is saying, and I appreciate your insight, Dr. Nagy. That's fabulous insight. But when I'm in my classroom, to be honest with you, Oprah, I feel like I'm just another student and not respected at all. If the students respected me, they would listen and obey my instructions instead of trying to take over my class like I'm not even the teacher. You want to know exactly how I feel when I walk into my classroom? Like I'm walking into the Atlantic Ocean during a hurricane. And it's not just in the required history classes that the students are disrespecting me in the mandatory classes. It's actually the worst class of all is my elective class, behavioral psychology. You would think that out of all the classes that they would be the best behaved since it's an elective class, but it's actually the worst class for behavior problems. 3 students in particular, Hosea, Jerome, and Angel, are the chief troublemakers.
Well, see, you know, look, what he said, Hosea would have had a perfect score on his paper, but instead he failed because of the points taken away. That is so unfair. He doesn't even try to understand us. He doesn't try to build some kind of relationship with us. It's just punishes us.
As I was saying before Angel rudely interrupted me, Oprah and Dr. Nagy, I recently had a meeting with the social sciences chairperson, Mary Kincaid, to get her insight. It was about the same advice that she gave me that Mr. Dobson, our principal, first gave me with the same non-result. It all came to a head when I handed out the first exam scores. And Hosea began shouting at me and another student and using expletives. I sent Hosea to the dean, Roy Haskins, for disciplinary action, and the dean did nothing at all except to tell me to handle all my disciplinary problems myself. In a second meeting with Dr. Dobson, he echoed Haskins' exact analysis, telling me that I am, quote unquote, on my own.
Mr. Scott doesn't like our class, and all he wants to do is make us suffer. It is so negative in the classroom. Who wants to learn or listen?
So, can you give us any more insight into maybe what their problems and what are your recommendations for trying to solve this problem?
I'll be glad to, Oprah. Thank you so much for having me here today. Now that we've defined the problem, excuse me, Oprah, my microphone just fell off, and I'll just hold it right now. Now that we've defined the problem, what we need to do is look for a solution here. And the cultural differences are severely affecting the people in this classroom. The students are not learning. The teacher is frustrated because he does not know how to handle these students. However, the teacher is the adult. The teacher is the adult, and the adult is the one who needs to conform. It is the administration and the teachers that have the responsibility to ensure that the students are learning. Surprisingly, when students are polled, white students define caring as a teacher who takes academic interest in them. But culturally diverse students define a teacher who cares as one who takes an interest in their personal lives. The school must create a community of learners through relationship building. The students cannot move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs with belongingness and love if their needs are not met at each level. The students must feel that the faculty and the administrators have genuine concern for them. We must provide cultural awareness training for faculty and for pre-service teachers that challenge the stereotypes of social class, power, injustice, and privilege. The teacher must create a physical climate that supports academic and social goals. They must establish expectations for behavior at the beginning, the very first day of class. And they must have a cultural awareness training. They must develop a caring classroom, and they also must work with families in the community.
Well, thank you for that. That's an excellent plan that's been laid out. Mr. Scott, how do you feel about this plan? Is this something that you think could work in your school?
Well, Oprah, I guess I would answer that question with a question
Okay, certainly.
for Dr. Nagy. I think if I correctly understand your philosophy about cultural awareness, Dr. Nagy, that what you're saying is that both I and my students each have our own particular biases and backgrounds. Is that right?
That's right. That is right, Troy. And we all have a lot of learning to do when it comes to our cultural knowledge and competence. This case confirms some research that I have conducted in conjunction with my fabulous boss, Wayne Smith. He first is to become culturally knowledgeable, well-grounded in theory, and an application of pluralistic multiculturalism. The second and most important step is to become culturally competent, to move beyond theory to the daily living of cultural awareness. He must then begin carefully examining the curriculum and redesigning it to incorporate transformational activities, including themes that can challenge the stereotypes of social class, power, injustice, and privilege, adding multicultural studies, literature, and other media.
Wow. Thank you so much for that insight.
You're very welcome.
And thank you, Mr. Scott, for your insight, too. Angel, we'd
Thank
like
you.
for you to have your final thoughts.
Well, I feel if Mr. Scott showed he cared about us instead of always punishing us, maybe the class could be different. We want to be a part of the class and build a relationship of a community of learners so that, we would want to learn. But then the way that we're treated, what's the point of even trying if all we do is get into trouble? So we want the class to be a cohesive setting where we can trust each other and feel like we belong. And it's hard to always be put down when all we want to do is be accepted and feel like we're part of some kind of community and then be able to have a good self-worth.
Well, thank you, Angel. And I'd like to thank all of my guests today for sharing their story. And thank you, Dr. Nagy, for giving us your insight and offering that solution to our problem of lack of cultural competence. I think with this relationship, as with any other relationship, whether it be employee, employer, husband and wife, student and teacher, communication is always key. Communication is important. You need to listen. As well as you need to feel like you can talk. And I think that's something that you were saying, Angel, that you need to be able to communicate and feel like someone's really listening to you and that they hear what you're saying. So communication would be a key part. Teachers, need to listen to the students. Students need to listen to the teacher so that we can then solve some of these problems. In order to do that, though, I think we have to understand culture. We have to understand each other's cultures as well as appreciate. And that's a deep word. It's not just superficial. You have to appreciate those differences. And by doing so, then we can coexist. And when we can coexist, we can build those relationships and then we can start to learn. And that dynamic learning environment becomes a positive one at that point. because this, of course, is for our children, which are my heart's joy, and that they are the leaders of our nation. So again, thank you all. And thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Here we go.